Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Friday, the 5th day of December, 2025. And we have three very important stories in the news this morning, stories that fit exactly what the Bible tells us is going to happen to our world in the last days before the return of Jesus Christ and the many events that it predicts that will precede it. So let's look at these stories and see how they fit. First of all, from Gatestone, China's social credit system being forced on the world. Let me tell you, this story sounds exactly like Revelation 11 and Revelation 13, as we'll talk about in a minute. And then this next story from Israel HaYom, the IDF, that's Israeli Defense Forces, achievements in the war are squandered. And it talks about the problems that are taking place in Lebanon with Hezbollah, with Hamas, in Gaza, and also with Iran. They've had achievements in each of these three areas, wars that militarily they've won, but now they're in the same position as when they started out. So fascinating story here. There. And then, with respect to the United States of America, also from Israel Hayam, more Mamdanis to come, and Trump can't stop it. Isn't that the truth? The demise of the United States. Sadly, we're seeing falling apart from within. And this story illustrates that. All right. For our purposes, probably the most important sign of our 25 signs we're near the end is sign 25, and that is Bible believers will understand what is taking place. We can understand what's going to go on and what is going on. So the three headlines we're looking at this morning all have huge last days implications, but implications that you and I can understand what is taking place as well as what will take place if we know what the scripture says. For example, the social credit story fits the coming rule of the final Antichrist and the false prophet. The fact that Israel cannot seem to win any war it's fighting fits the lack of peace Scripture predicts for them in the last days. And the United States, sadly, will have more Mamdanis arising that will dilute the country, weakening us both nationally and internationally to the place where we are a non-player in last days Bible prophecy. So, because we do know what is predicted for the time of the end, according to sign 25 of these 25 signs, these signs, as bad as they are, confirm what is now taking place and eventually will take place. So, rather than become discouraged, we should recognize the times in which we are living, and in doing so, being the person that the Lord wants us to be for such a time as this. Again, the book is a free download from our website, Educating Our World, under the heading of Bible Prophecy. 25 signs. We're near the end. All right, let's look at these stories. First of all, China's social credit system is being forced upon the world. This is from Gatestone. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, apparently attempting to impersonate a Soviet dictator, appears to be forcing mandatory digital ID on the population, despite huge opposition to the issue. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital IDs, Starmer said on September 26 at the Global Progress Action Summit. In other words, if you refuse to obey, there will be nothing for you but poverty and unemployment. Starmer, who apparently could not care less about the thousands of migrants from North Africa and the Middle East, both legal and illegal, that continue to pour to the UK, gaslights the public with this totalitarian measure and that is somehow it's needed to stop illegal immigration. Remember when the world used to have closed borders everywhere until the globalists opened them up? U.S. President Donald Trump seems to have pretty much closed U.S. borders without the need for any digital anything. Bizarrely, the article continues, former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, the globalist who launched a flood of migrants into the UK and solidified the idea of a, quote, multicultural state, has been endlessly advocating for digital ID. He is claiming that UK desperately needs it. The question is, for what? While the European Union has been rolling out digital IDs for some member states, citizens have not been asked if they consent to such a measure. Isn't that interesting? It is Americans, including Bill Gates and the controlling owner of Oracle, Larry Ellison, who are financing the digital ID push. That's Michael Schellenberger. He's the author of an article from September 28th, 2025. And here's the bottom line. The World Economic Forum, despite being elected by nobody, leads the G20 Summit Smart Cities Alliance. All right. This particular story seems to be right out of the book of Revelation, chapters 11 and 13. Basically, it presents a world where the government, as well as unelected organizations, are in complete control of everyone's lives, with the idea of privacy being a thing of the past. They wish to know everything about us, as well as controlling what we read, what we hear, and what we observe. So this push for everyone having a digital ID is setting the stage for the arrival of the predicted man of sin, the final Antichrist, who will use this technology eventually for control over those living on the earth. And this will be, of course, at some future time. He, along with his cohort, the false prophet, will force the people of the world to eventually take his mark where they cannot buy or sell without it. Now, this next sentence is very important. Please understand. The present digital IDs are not the mark of the beast. Why? Well, you cannot have the mark of the beast without the beast, and he hadn't arrived yet. However, what it's doing, it's laying the groundwork for his future appearance. So that's what we need to know here. That's the takeaway. That's why it's essential for you and I to understand the biblical scenario of the end time so we won't be disillusioned or discouraged. We see it happening just as the scripture predicted. All right, headline number 2. And this one's fascinating here. It's some of the things we've been saying, and it's summed up in this Israel HaYom story. The IDF, that's the Israeli Defense Forces, of achievements in the war are squandered. In Lebanon, as in Lebanon, nothing has changed. A year after the ceasefire, Hezbollah still stands on its feet and refuses to disarm. The same is true in Gaza. Hamas is rebuilding its forces and its political standing under American protection. We have not learned that war is never an end in itself. It's always meant to serve diplomatic goals. Last week marked the one year since the ceasefire began with Hezbollah that ended the campaign on the northern border. The one Lebanese Shiite terrorist organization launched on October 8th, 2023, a day after Hamas's murderous terrorist assault began. During the war in Israel's north, and especially towards its end, once Israel recovered and regained its footing, the IDF inflicted heavy blows on Hezbollah. I'll say they knocked out about 80 or 90% of the leadership, eliminating its senior leaders and commanders, neutralizing much of its military capabilities. The fear of the 180,000 rockets the organization possessed, which Israelis believed could paralyze their daily life and cause thousands of deaths, faded as if it had never existed. So that was good. It's been a year since that has ended. Here comes the however. Yet a year after the agreement was reached and the fighting ended, it is clear that in Lebanon, as in Lebanon, nothing has changed. Hezbollah stands firmly on its feet despite the blows it absorbed. It retains its standing among the Lebanese Shiite population and is working determinedly to do what? To rebuild its capabilities while refusing to give up its weapons. Sound familiar? Yeah, the original sin, of course, was Israel's willingness to sign a dubious agreement that anyone with eyes in their head, though apparently not in Israel's political and military leadership, concede that Hezbollah never intended to honor and that the Lebanese government had neither the ability nor the will to enforce on the Shiite terrorist organization. In other words, they never meant to keep their agreement. They just gave them time to reload and rearm. But a year has now passed, as the article says, and although the IDF has carried out impressive covert operations targeting the group's field operatives, it's becoming clear that they're not enough to prevent Hezbollah from rebuilding or to eliminate what remains of its military strength. In this sense, last week's killing of Hezbollah's chief of staff, Tabatadi, in the heart of Beirut is the exception that proves the rule, not evidence that Israel has truly decided to take off gloves and escalate its campaign against Hezbollah. Now, here's what's really interesting, as we've been talking about, the same reality exists in Gaza. After 2 years of a difficult war and numerous operational achievements, a ceasefire has been imposed on Israel that allows Hamas to rebuild its power and its political position under American protection. Anyone who believes that an Arab or a Muslim force will emerge willing to confront the organization and disarm it is deluding itself. Just as anyone who believes the U.S. will allow Israel to resume fire in Gaza and thereby topple the one foreign policy achievement the Trump administration can claim. And that's, like we've said, been our worry here too. Finally, it's worth recalling Iran. Israel dealt it several blows, yet barely 100 days have passed, and already there's talk of resuming another round from Iran. Iranian threats of revenge and Tehran's determination to renew its march towards nuclear capability. Israel also tends to boast that it succeeded in toppling Bashar Assad's regime in Syria, but in the past year has dragged Israel to futile involvement into Syria's quagmire. It is ending in a deadlock in the talks Syria initiated with Israel, an attempt to reach understandings that would secure stability on their northern border. And here too, everyone is waiting for instructions from Washington to halt Israel's activity and military presence in Syria. You see the pattern that's there? For all this emerges a familiar pattern. Israel excels at achieving victories on the battlefield, but fails to complete the task or even loses those gains in the diplomatic campaign that follows. After all, war is never a goal in itself. It's always meant to serve diplomatic aims, a lesson Israel has not learned or has forgotten. Israel's refusal to formulate a political vision for Gaza's future, this is one of the problems we've talked about from the beginning, brought upon it a forced agreement that allows Hamas to retain its strength in the territory. The decision to halt fire in Lebanon 5 minutes to midnight enables Hezbollah to rebuild, and the absence of any political initiative alongside military action has collapsed the Arab-Israeli front against Iran. In other words, all the fighting and dying has been for naught. This is me talking now. Israel still finds itself in a position of having no peace or security from its enemies who exist on both its northern and southern borders. This search for peace has been continual since the rebirth of the modern state of Israel in 1948 and will continue until the time of the return of Christ. Here's the however, though. However, Scripture does predict a window of time in the future where Israel will believe they are secure from their enemies. It is at that time when the nation will experience the worst calamity that it has ever experienced. 1 Thessalonians 5 says, when they say peace and safety, better look out, for sudden destruction is on the way. And so Israel at a time in the future will feel they finally have rest from their enemies for a time being. And then that's when the worst of the worst appears. All right, now our third and last story. Headline 3, more Mamdanis to come, and Trump cannot stop it. This is from Israel HaYom. Despite the belief that the president will solve all the problems in the battle for public opinion among young Americans, Israel is being defeated by a well-oiled machine, at the end of which more Mamdanis await. It was cold this week in New York, cold and beautiful. On some days, the temperature hovered around freezing, but the atmosphere broadcast holiday spirit. From the crowd storming the stores to take advantage of Thanksgiving sales to the Christmas decorations already twinkling on every street corner, all the markets had already opened, offering all kinds of food and souvenirs. In short, another December had begun, business as usual. Well, not quite. A question mark now hovers over New York, larger and brighter than any lit Christmas tree. His name is Zoran Mamdani, and he brings with him troubling uncertainty to a city that needs certainty more than anything else. We'll have to wait and see what happens, Hillary Clinton said when I asked her about Mamdani at the HaYom conference held Tuesday in New York. Others were more direct. Sylvan Adams said Mamdani is a Trojan horse sported by Qatar. All right, what this story does, and it goes out and anticipates where the United States is sadly headed. On many levels, as we have documented here, we are destroying ourselves from within, electing individuals who will take away our freedoms, all under the guise of making life more fair and more just for everybody, leveling the playing field for all the people of America. Socialism, communism leads to complete governmental control, and that's exactly where we are headed. So once again, we observe that each of these stories we're looking at today is moving our world toward the predicted outcome that Scripture lays out for us. Now, rather than being discouraged, we know exactly what is coming and what we ought to do, namely be the lights of Christ in this lost world, preaching the gospel, teaching the Bible, and encouraging one another. And that's what we do here every day, and we trust you are doing this in your own life too. Not disillusioned, not discouraged, because you know from Scripture, sign 25, that we can understand what's going on, we know where it's headed, but we also know in the end that Jesus Christ is the winner, and those of us who believed in him are the winners also. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless you.